many people have read his writings. And normally when this man writes, talks, or even sends an instant message, we all listen. So today we're just going to take the time just to view into the life of Vern Stewart. All right.
Well, he said this was going to be a fireside chat, but I don't see any fireplace.
We can do that.
Wait a minute. You mentioned fire around the wrong people. Vern, I've read your bio, and I know that you originally came from the West Coast. Originally came from the West Coast?
Correct.
And then migrated to the Mid-Atlantic area. Correct. Now, would you mind sharing with us how many years have you been in the leather community?
What century is this? Actually, I've been in the leather community. It's funny when I saw the thing on the sign there, Fireside Chat. I was around when FDR did the Fireside Chat. So, I guess since probably 1956. West Coast kid that got involved a long time ago, many years ago. And I guess it's because I was always nosy and wanted to find out what was going on in the community. San Francisco, Bay Area, was a bit different than for some of you that were born and raised here on the in the South, southern area. We didn't have quite the amount of outward segregation there. They were a bit more discreet out there. And African Americans dealing with the leather community was virtually almost non-existent. Whether it was Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, even Seattle. But there was not the type of thing, and I read it someplace last night on something there about people being asked for, 47 different IDs when they were going into bars and this, that, and that. We didn't have that as much. But the leather community in those days was very, very, how should I say it? They were exclusive. You didn't see too many of us in the bar. Consequently, I was in there. I wanted to find out. All we could do is tell me to get out if that was the case, but they wouldn't dare because I had a mouth. And I started going to the leather bars mainly out of curiosity. One of the first big bars in San Francisco was called the Toolbox, and it was a motorcycle bar. You'd see all these bikes and things parked out in front, and you'd go in, and you'd listen to the conversations, and the leather bars were the greatest place in the world where you could learn about how to make quiche and about the operas. Well, what's wrong with this picture? And some of the guys, they'd be in leather, and I mean, so much leather. And they'd come out, taxi! kind of funny. In those days, south of Market, and I'm sure if you've been out to Folsom at all, Folsom Street, that was known as the Miracle Mile. You could walk into one bar, crawl out of that one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. There was like about 8 or 9 bars in that one 2 or 3 block area. And I found out from talking to the guys when you get to know them or have a drink, that they were pretty much regular people. They weren't, like, there was this picture of, leather. You hear the word leather, and it immediately comes to mind for a lot of African Americans, that and chains, whips, and being tied up, strung up. Please. Most of those people didn't do that. They weren't even into that, There was a very small group of people that were into that at that time. And I often wondered, well, how come I'm the only black person here? And I would say to the friends that I knew, what'd you do last night? Oh, we went to Miss Fang's bar down the street or something. Where did you go? I said, well, I was at the Toolbox or the Ramrod or Phoebe's or someplace like Phoebe's. What is that? I said, oh, it's a leather bar. Leather bar. You go to those places? I said, I try to talk people into it. Occasionally I would be fortunate enough to get a couple of folks who would come in. They were still very, very nervous about going into a leather bar because, well, several reasons. We all know that of the African American community, they have more than just a problem of being gay or coming out to their families, relatives, friends, etc., etc. And there's a lot of religion involved. We were raised, many of us, with that. And you know how Baptist ministers and what have you feel about faggots. And it was difficult for young men, whether it was out here or out there, to really feel comfortable, and they didn't feel comfortable going in a bar like that. They didn't know what to expect, even though they might have had in the back of their mind what they would like to see, what they'd like to know about, but they didn't have the guts to check it out. Well, I was raised, if you want to know about it, go find out. That's the way my parents raised me. And I was not one of those yes sir, no sir people. Never. My folks didn't even. Well, you don't have to sir anybody, So that's how I was raised. So consequently, as the years went on, I really got involved with guys. I met a lot of guys, and really great guys. And they had bars that blacks would attend in an area called the Tenderloin area. All the sleazy folks down there. Yep. You could get anything you wanted down there. Fur coat, diamond ring, cocaine, whatever.
Right. Yep.
And lots of hustlers stayed in that area. And another area called Polk Street, but we all called it Polkstrasse. And we'd go to Polkstrasse if we wanted to dance and have a little fun and what have you, and then flee from there. So I got to know a lot of people in those early years when Harvey Milk came out to San Francisco, moved out there from New York. He was, I'm sure many of you have seen the movie. It wasn't exactly like that. he was a loudmouth New Yorker. And he and I used to fight and argue all the time. When he wanted to run for something, he always, he had a little camera store on Castro Street up near 19th. And he would go over to a bar called the Pendulum.
Yep.
We all called it Nairobi Lounge because all the black folks was there. And all the white folks that wanted black folks were there. So that was called the Nairobi Lounge. But he'd come over there and try to talk people into running for, him running for supervisor, this, that, and the other. And we used to get into conversation because I disagreed with a lot of his thinking at that time. But we talked, we got along, but I always told him, I'll never vote for you. I don't like what you think about this, that, or the other. He eventually changed his attitude somewhat over the years, but he was hard to know. Now they haven't God. Well, yes, he broke a lot of rules and did a lot of things, and basically put San Francisco on the map as a gay mecca. And everybody wanted to move to San Francisco. Didn't have any jobs, but they wanted to move to San Francisco. Didn't know where they were going to stay, but they had to move to San Francisco. So in the early years, there was an awful lot of roommates. But then rent was a lot cheaper in those days also. And I dealt with him, and there were a lot of people that were closet cases there that were in City Hall in those days. And there was an awful lot of gays that were in the police department. Detectives, head of burglary and this, that, and the other. And they always generally hung out in the Tenderloin area. And I often wondered, why. So I finally met one night who was he was in charge of burglary. And he hit on me. Well, entrapment, nay, and we're not going to do that. And he'd come over to a bar called the Fantasy. He'd stop in there. They had a guy, piano player, who everybody liked him. Sidney was his name. And Sidney was big, hefty black man. But he played the piano for him. And this guy used to come in, police officer come in. Oh, I'm just checking the, see how everything is. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And he'd get into going to the bathroom, this and do that, and I'd find it, I got your number, Missy. And then that's when I found out his partner was gay and blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But it was very hush-hush in those days. And I finally got around to checking out some of the clubs. Their fight clubs. And I decided to well, they had runs. And those runs, those clubs, were runs where you didn't run to the closest Motel 6. These were runs where they were out 100, 200 miles and camping out, bringing your tents, cooking out, and all at home. And they became very big and very popular. And about 5 or 6 of the main clubs there in San Francisco area had them, and a couple of them in Los Angeles as well. And I got kind of involved with what called the Barbary Coasters. And then there was the Satyrs. Satyrs was, they were a little bit more heavy S&M. And I wasn't quite ready to deal with all that. So I thought, well, I'll stay with Barbie Coast I finally joined a club, the GDI, which stood for Goddamn Independence. But, and they were supposed to be a bike club, except they had no bikes. I bought a bike, and the president of the club, Johnny, who also had been a former empress. They have that whole court system out there, the imperial court system. Miss Hoo-Ha, Miss this, that, and the other, Miss Porta Potty, and all the rest of it. He was just thrilled when they voted me in, because they could tell everybody, we have a bike club because we have somebody with a bike. So, I joined that club. We went on the runs and this, that, and the other, and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time with that, there were a couple of quote-unquote leather guys that were members of the club. Of course, one had been a former empress, Bushy Phyllis. She was an empress, but she put on her little leather things and what have you, went out. But they were more of a social club than they really were like heavy-duty bike club, you know. And they put on shows, talent shows, and they did the grand in those days. I mean, they had one at the Palace of Fine Arts, if anybody knows where that is, that over near the Gold Gate.
Yeah,
And we did one at the Fillmore.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Well, the first thing they asked me after I was voted in, well, what size heels do you wear? Oh, nay. There are no shoes that fit these feet. No. And he said, well, you've got to be in the show. I said, no, I don't have to be in the show. I'll collect tickets or something like that. So they could never talk me into that. And I was thinking, maybe I joined the wrong club, you know? It's like, oh, God. Well, after that, we had Phoebe's. Phoebe's was a bar that, if you all have seen a statue of David, a motorcycle cap, the DC Eagle has one in their case. It used to be all around. Well, they were really basically the leather bar of back in the days with the back room and all of that stuff, you know. And places were packed. They had at least 6 or 7 bathhouses in San Francisco, so you had your choice of the type of folks you wanted to spend your evening there. You had the Bulldog, which was on Church Street, right down in the Tenderloin, and people used to love to go there. Then you had a couple of fancy ones, Dave's on Broadway, and some south of Market, this, that, and the other. So it was a real free-for-all in those days. I got involved with the leather aspect of it after I attended a contest in a bar which is now well, they've changed the name now. It used to be the Ramrod, and the Bolt, which is now the bar on the corner of Dory and Folsom there. And so you had all these different bars, and they all had contests, leather contests. And when they first had these leather contests, this was way before they had IML. IML had not been heard of, really, because Renslow didn't start that until 1979 in Chicago at the Gold Coast. But they would have leather contests, Mr. So-and-so leather from whatever that bar was, this, that, and the other. They were more kind of local until Renslow did that. Of course, at the same time, you had Drummer Magazine, which was out there, headquartered there. So Drummer was like the macho magazine. And when they started publishing Drummer, people that, and finally IML started, there was this big comparison thing. Well, people that entered Drummer, they were real men. People that entered IML, they were Miss Americas, and they just marched up and down, you know, and that was the way it was taught. There was this big difference. So, and you didn't run for one, like now, people run for everything. Run for the bus, run for an envelope, and then they run everything. And there used to be a difference. Why did you enter Drummer? What's the thing about Drummer as opposed to IML? And people that had entered or thought about entering IML, like, oh, you're going to enter that? Oh, I don't think so. So you had this separation. These straight guys, the bush guys, the motorcycles, and this, that, and the other. And I remember one year after being involved with that for a while, there's a club called the 15 Association, which is still in existence after all these years. 15 Association is kind of like the equivalent of, what's the club in Chicago that they just had a run?
Hellfire.
Hellfire, yeah. It was kind of the equivalent of Hellfire on the West Coast. And they're one of their very first president was a black man. A lot of people didn't know that. And he was really a nice guy. And he ran that club. He didn't take no crap from anybody. And all the people behaved until the AIDS epidemic hit. And for a while, nobody really knew what that was all about. Oh, he's got cancer. Or, oh, he has lung problems. Or he's got pneumonia. And next thing you know, somebody with pneumonia died, you know. Boom, gone. And nobody was telling anybody what was going on. And at that time, when that started coming up, he was diagnosed president. And coming from Southern family, coming from religion, the background, he couldn't handle it. So he worked at the social service department in San Francisco, a pretty good job, but he just couldn't handle it. And one day he left work, grabbed a cab, went to the Golden Gate Bridge, jumped off. So that was the first starting to come into the AIDS epidemic. As it got worse, San Francisco General finally opened up a AIDS ward. It was the #1 AIDS ward in the United States at that point. And floor upon floor. And people that didn't want anybody to know that they had been diagnosed with pneumocystis and all of that. You wouldn't see them for a few weeks. Well, where's so I haven't seen much like Ward 5A. We all pitched in cooking and delivering the food and this, that, and that, all those people that were there. And in my first 3 years, I have a shoebox at home with over 427 memorial services in there. That's how fast it was going in San Francisco. And of course it went, spread, New York, everywhere else, had it. And we had to, get on the bandwagon there and talk to the mayor and supervisors and what have you to see about setting up some kind of fundraisers. One of the first ones was the AIDS Emergency Fund. And then there came San Francisco AIDS Foundation. And of course, all of us that were healthy and well, we certainly pitched in to do whatever we possibly could to raise money. So, I mean, at that time, we were having fundraisers and charity things 3 and 4 times a week. I mean, when you were mentioning earlier about going to a nickel and dime you, they $1 and we put it out, but we raised a lot of money. And that's why also Michael Valerio, who was the founder of Folsom Fair, and I were very good friends, and he started Folsom Fair basically because of that, to raise money, not like what it's turned into now. It's like a P.T. Barnum circus now, but at those times, in those days, I didn't think that because I sat on the board of Folsom. It was called SMILE, then SMMILE, before it's changed now to the Folsom Events or whatever it's called now. And most of the people that went or attended were leather people. You didn't see Miss Thing pushing her baby carriage down the street and all these dogs running up and down. You didn't think, well, we didn't have any of that. But we raised money. To us, it seemed like a lot. We raised $250,000 to $300,000 that weekend. And we were not, they have barrels now or something, collect money when you go into the entry. 8 years, we never did that. But we still raised a sizable amount of money. And then when that one started, International Mr. Leather 1985, Patrick Toner, who at that point was the youngest IML that had ever won that title at 24. He came back and he was aware of all the things that were going on, AIDS, this, that, and the other, and he wanted to do something also. So he started, it's called Ringo Alley Street Fair, named after a 1-block-long street off of Folsom there, and did the whole street fair thing and what have you. It went over like dynamite. He was very smart. He got a hold of Bob Ross, who was the publisher of the Bay Area Reporter, and he fluttered his eyes and what have you. Patrick was a very attractive man, and he fluttered his eyes, and Bob Ross gave him, I believe it was $80,000 to get this going. So from Ringo Alley, then it changed. The name was Up Your Alley Street Fair, and from that, it's now what is known as the Dory Alley Street Fair, because they had to move it from Ringo to Dory, and I think now they're being ready to move it again because people are complaining, because now it's all condos along there,
Yeah.
So people don't want all them folks with their asses hanging out in front of their doors. So they have that going on. San Francisco, in terms of people entering contests and leather contests and IML, when they finally got it going after the second IML, people were kind of interested. Well, the African Americans that entered, there were quite a few those first 3 or 4 years, but they were usually sponsored by the club or the store that they worked at, one of the leather stores or something or another there. Alan Selby, who we all have heard of, Mr. S. He was the one that started that when he came from London over here. He and his partner Peter, and they got involved with that, and there were 3 or 4 guys, good-looking guys, that were there. I brought some photos and some reminders of some of the things that our African American brothers have started over the years, including even the first ONYX calendar. And so we, as things changed over the years, people became a bit more cautious about safe sex, this, that, and the other. And of course, who's now Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, she was mayor back then. She became mayor when Harvey and George Moscone were shot and killed at City Hall, and she was president of the board of supervisors, so she moved in. She was very anti-gay. Her feces had no odor, and so she wasn't, but she didn't realize the amount of gays that worked at City Hall that were gay, and that they had a clout, and they spoke up. And she suddenly realized, duh, well, if I want to be reelected mayor, I better start kissing some ass over here on Castro Street, And that's how she got her second term. Well, her first term, which was left over from, So she changed her tune. I was in an organization called, well, the initial CUAV, which stood for Community United Against Violence. And we held a couple of fundraisers at her house, out Seacliff. I didn't know at the time that the gal that was our executive director knew her as well. I never did quite understand. What's this deal along? What's she know about Dianne? What's going on here? And they had become really close friends. So we had an in. We could get money, held fundraisers at her house, and she helped out and things like that. That was a plus, As far as African Americans leathered in, a few more started coming in. But nothing really changed until 1984, when a young man from Denver, Colorado, stepped to that stage at Park West in Chicago, and things were just totally not the same. He gave a speech that to this day, there's only been one other person that's happened to. When he gave his speech, the entire audience stood and applauded. Ron Moore was very, very special man. He worked for the phone company, was as funny could be. He never took things very seriously. He says, I'm not going to get a paycheck from being IML. And I also am still working for Ma Bell. So I got to work these two things out. He used to call me on Sunday mornings. Or I'd call him, what you doing? Well, I just put on my fuzzy slippers and my bathrobe. He said, I got to do something about my hair. It's only rollers. And I have to go to such and such and such. Funnier than shit. But the one thing that I noticed then that continued for quite some time, that there was a racist prejudice in San Francisco that came out very strongly when he took the title. Prior to that, Colt Thomas, who was the year before, and 1 year before that, and blah, blah, blah. All those hoo-haws, they all, just said, oh, well, I'm in a hoo-ha, don't I look pretty? When he came, the first thing that you always were invited to back then was the Gay Pride Parade, San Francisco. That was the grand parade. Anybody who's anybody, they had. And that's where IML always made their initial from Chicago there. And so he was coming out to be in the parade. And the runner-up that year had been sponsored by the Arena, which was a bar, and they were the very first bar that ever started that bare chest calendar thing that I'm sure some of you have heard that they do every year and have done for the last 15, 20 years, raising money for AIDS emergency fund and what have you. Anyway, every year they always had the float with the Arena and all the leather folks on there and what have you, and IML was always on that float. That year, the owner and the manager of that bar, who later on became the manager of the most popular bar in San Francisco, the San Francisco Eagle, which is now closed, but it was big in its day. They put the word out, oh no, this year we're only going to have our contestant on the float. Imagine that, all these other years, and nobody has ever had a problem with that until he came along. Well, I was fit to be tied. I went off. I marched my happy ass right on down to the BAR. And I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And I told Marcus, who was working down there, Mr. Marcus Hernandez, my older sister. And so I told him what had just transpired. And I said, we need to do something about this. Well, Marcus had a yellow streak up his spine that time. And he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to upset the folks at the Arena, because he would go over there to MC their little contest and this, that, and the other. And they gave him enough vitamin V to sink a battleship, So he didn't want to cut off his nose to spite his face, And I told him, I said, well, this is outrageous. So I thought, okay, I went to Chuck Slayton. Chuck Slayton was the owner of the bar called Chaps. And Chuck Slayton, who went on to become IML in '85. And I said, this is ridiculous. Well, he said, oh, we can't have this. Well, his lover, who happened to be a San Francisco police officer, he says, oh, well, we'll handle this. They had just bought, the week before, a brand new big black Chevy something or other, one of the big ass trucks, and his other half had a beautiful Harley. They put the Harley in the truck, bolted that, tied it down, put Ron Moore on the top of that Harley with his cute little ass hanging out, and down the parade they went. They brought down the house. Nobody paid any attention to, what? What bar was that? He's who? Ron Moore he was just well received. But at the same time, where the problems came up with the all the problems with race was up until that year, and there's probably in that book, Drummer and all those they always advertised the leather shops and leather stores, both in San Francisco, Los Angeles, wherever. And they always had the IML from that current year to model. Either the chaps with the outside zippers or this, that, and the other. Every year, they conveniently forgot Ron Moore. He was not in any of the ads across the United States. And he and I talked about this, And he said, well, I'm the first. I guess I'm going to have to expect that. I said, yes, but don't let it drag you down. So that weekend was his birthday. And San Francisco in those days, you were very status conscious about if you were invited to something, and if it was something big, oh well, everybody who's anybody got an invitation to that. Well, I threw him a birthday party. His birthday was on May the 29th or something like that. I threw it at my house, and I only sent selected invitations. Many were called, but few were chosen. So, people were having what? Vern's having what? Well, I didn't get an invitation. Imagine that. And all those that were coming over, big party for him and what have you, big cake and all that stuff. And of course, the next day, I heard that there was a party over at your house. Did you now? Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't get an invitation. I didn't know anything about it. I said, dawg, you know what it was? It was a last minute thing, and I just didn't have everybody's address. Hello. And that was before we had Miss Dell and Miss IBM. So, I told Marcus, I said, you're wrong for not having said anything. You got this damn column that you can write and let the world know about it. And he did. I'm very disappointed with that. And we did not talk for, honey, a Christmas wind came before I said hello to him. Mm-hmm. And he was, well, what did I do? Well, it's what you didn't do, So he finally did put something in. And then, I'm not sure if he wrote it because they had taken away his free drink card or not. I kind of think it might have been, But he got on them about that. Ron was a sweetheart, and of course, for any of you that don't know, he's the only person whose sister grabbed the title of International Ms. Leather the year after Jill Carter in 97. And he was someone that gave thought to anything he did, very professional, and he also made it very possible for other African Americans to enter that contest and be proud. And the following years, there was always at least 3 or 4 or more, that entered that contest. Wasn't a big, but considering when there was none before, and now there's 4, and in between that year and up till now, we've had only one other, D. Cannon. D. Cannon was very likable, handsome, good-looking young man. But unfortunately, he didn't think for himself. He let other people tell him because he's pretty, and some of the Caucasians thought he was pretty and wanted to get all up in his drawers, And so he listened to the wrong people. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a good record for being able to have completed or done something with the community his title year. We know he's down there in LA somewhere, he's down in Palm Springs, someplace down there, but you never hear from him, you never see him. In the meantime, after him, there were 3 more contestants, African American, who were in the top 3. There were 3. One has passed away the year that Larry Everett won in 1995. He's gone. He did a lot of work in his community. He was very active. He never gave it up. Now we have Mr. D over there, who has done a great job with that this year, and he's only the second man of color to hold the MAL title. I'm sorry, third. So you know, we're getting closer. He's a heartbeat away. Kick him, let him fall down the steps. You can wear the tiara. But you know, back in the day, there was so many problems that kids that used to come out from the South and what have you, and they wanted to be a part of it, but they just did not know how to deal with it. And unfortunately, there was no one there to really teach them, and train them, or work with them. And that's when I finally said, you know, it's time for some of these people to hear from somebody that's kind of been around a little bit, to avoid these pitfalls, or letting somebody talk you into something just because they think you'll do good. If you're not ready, and you don't have a clue, they can't pour piss out of a boot with directions on the heel, then why are you going to be bothered entering a contest? You know? So it's like, okay, we worked with people. I did. And I always thought it was very important to have a history, a knowledge of people. And there were any number of people of color on the West Coast, San Diego, and in LA, that were very active in the leather community. They just didn't run for a title, you know? And I was the same way. I ran one time, and that was it. You know, I said, oh, nay. I ran for Mr. Pendulum Leather. That's the one that's also known as Nairobi Lounge. And, or the Cotton Club, as they used to call it. And I ran 1 year, and the guy that beat me, he went on to IML, and I believe 1 year he was a runner-up. And then the next year, they couldn't find his name on the top 50. So it was like, okay. After that, I never had really any desire to go through that shit. It was like, oh man, you know. And I started becoming involved with IML, dealing with travel. I used to set all the travel packages up for everybody that wanted to go from the West Coast to Chicago every year. Hotel, ticket, and that's when they had reserved seating at tables and what have you, and all of that. Champagne, luggage tags, all of that for $490. That includes your hotel and all that. You know, those days are long gone. One night you paid damn near that for a hotel room, you know. And I also became very aware of how IML treated some of their title holders. And I was very disturbed when they used to, back in the day, the big prize was a motorcycle. Oh, and it sat on this little table and whirled and turned while it was out in the lobby and all of that. Until Colt Thomas got his, and they didn't ship it to him until November. He won in May. Then we had Patrick Toner, who got his. I drove Patrick to the motorcycle place where it was supposed to be shipped to over in Concord, California. And he looked at it, it was a 450. And he said, well, I'd like to increase the size. I want to get a bigger bike. And we just turn this and turn it over and I'll pay the difference. And I was standing right there with the man and said, oh no, we can't do that. And I went, well, why not? We don't do that with used motorcycles. This thing in Chicago was doing used motorcycles, all clean and polished and everything. And they were used, 450. So Scott Tucker, the following year, he said, what am I going to do with a motorcycle living in Philadelphia where all that snow and shit is? And so he gave it back to them to say, why don't you all auction it off? And they had a big center there called the Howard Brown Clinic. And Tom Domkowski was in charge of that for a long time. And we never did hear if any money came from it, if it was sold, what happened to it. The following year, the kid from IML from Germany won in '87. He looked at it and said, well, I have a tricycle bigger than this. And he had a motorcycle at home. So he said, no, y'all keep it, you know. So those were the kind of things that you had to watch out for and be brought to people's attention. And I told guys that I used to help and mentor and all of that. Okay, this is what you avoid. You don't want to deal with this. You don't want to deal with that. And back in those days, the economy was certainly much better. So a lot of the bars gave money, and they paid for your hotel accommodations at IML. They paid for your airfare. Some of them even gave you a stipend or something or another to help out. Very few do that now. Very few. So people have to strive and do the best they can to get their money together to go on these trips. And that's one of the things that I tell people all the time. You're going to enter this for what reason? Do you have a well-to-do other half? Is there an unlimited funds that you can come up with? And I don't think they realize, a lot of people when they enter, it sounds fun. It's fun. Oh, well, why did you enter this contest? Somebody asked, one of the judges asked somebody, oh, because it's going to be this year. Oh, because it's going to be fun. Well, do I want somebody that's just going to have fun, you know, as my representative, you know, not fun. So, anyway, it's like, I thought about that. So I said, we've got to do something. And I was so disappointed, and I don't mind telling you this, as having been a judge this year at IML. They had 53 contestants and 9 judges. Of the 53 contestants, 28 of them were asked, name me 3, not 5, not 10, 3 former IMLs, excluding the one that's sitting here at the table. And 28 people did not come up with a name. Oh, wow. You know, so you're thinking, okay, this person entered this contest for what reason? If you don't know anything about your history, you're going to deal with the future and the past. And so that's been one of my number one things with dealing with the guys. Some think they know it all, and they don't want you to tell them anything. And those are the ones that usually don't do well. You know, they fall by the wayside. And I just think, I mean, there's been many funny stories that have happened over the IML contestants, things that have all cause your hair to fall out or grow back on in your ball, you know. You have no idea of some of the shit that goes on behind the scenes, you know. It's just unbelievable. I sat in on the interviews in 1986 at IML, and perfect example was the guy from New York, gorgeous, handsome man. I mean, to die for. Well, we were sitting there, and he comes in. I was sitting next to Tony DeBlas, and said, Tony said, well, what's with the white tennis shoes? Well, I paid $125 for these shoes, and I'm going to wear them. Next. I couldn't believe it. So for the next 4 or 5 years, Mark has always put in his column, he did one just before IML, the March of the Warriors or something that are going to IML. He said, for goodness sake, don't be wearing no white tennis shoes. People, they don't think, they don't know, and that's one of the biggest problems I see right now with some of the new ones. There's guys here I observed and heard today, and one in particular asked an excellent question here about money and how you deal with all these finances and things. And over the years, I know for a fact Scott Tucker spent $38,000 his year, which may not seem like much now, but $38,000 in 1986 was quite a bit of money. But then he had a wealthy professor as his other half. Patrick Toner was just plain cute, and everybody gave him money, you know. Oh, yeah, take it, you know. But it's very expensive, it's very costly. I've told people, don't be whipping out your credit card every single time you go somewhere. You best be calling somebody. These people want you to come to their bars. Well, we'd like for you to come. Well, fine. Cough up some money. Bring some of them ducats out, you know, and we want to see that, or have a place for you to stay, so you're not putting out no $200-300 in hotel accommodation. It's not cheap running for a title or having a title. You know, all of you that have titles, you know that. You know, I'm not making that up, and so I tell people always, learn the word no. It's 2 letters. N-O. You can't go to everything, and they shouldn't expect you to go to everything. And the only other thing is, if you are invited to something, or invited to 2 or 3 things at the same time on the same date, always say you go to the one that you were invited to first. You don't, I don't really want to go with that one, but, in order to show good PR and politically correct, that's what you do. Now, Larry Everett, who was IML 95, he did something that was finally caught on with others, and Dee mentioned it today. I told him when he won the title, country boy from Oklahoma, you know, and he went to like IML to give up his title. I came to MAL, and he came to ABW. But all the rest of that year, he went to bumfuck Mississippi, he went to Hingham High, Georgia, he went to all these little small towns around. And they love him to this day because he actually came to this little town. He was actually here. Yeah. And that's the way he was so well respected and loved. And it doesn't hurt to go to these, you don't have to go to all the big things, you know. Well, we've seen all the hoo-ha's, you know. I call them all hoo-ha's. International Mr. Hoo-ha, 86, 89, whatever, you know. But I think that also one of the big problems with African Americans entering contests, they just don't feel exactly comfortable always. They don't know what to expect, and people don't always give them the correct information. Or they may tell, oh yeah, you ought to order because he's cute, or because he's nice. Well, for me, that's not my representative. You know, I don't want somebody that's just cute. You know, you got a head on your shoulders, you got a brain, you know, can you speak, can you talk, things like that. And over the years, there have been some excellent African American contestants that I often thought should have won. But then I always have to stop and look at who the judges were. And that's a big problem, as we've all seen recently, you know, and I'm not talking about this year, but things, they have their own personal picks, and they don't look at the overall picture and really judge a person for what they can reject, what they can support, and the type of headspace that they're in, you know, and that's sad that is that way. But you know, I don't. As I'm getting older and fading away, I'm going to, you know, I just try my damnedest to try to bring things to the forefront, especially if it's something that's very, very wrong and being unfair with people. And yeah, and that doesn't mean just people. I'm talking about clubs as well. There's clubs that their shit ain't together, you know, or there's so much bickering and fighting and all this bullshit that's going on. That's like, oh God, why are you all still together? You know, what is this? Can't you all get along? Which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. African American leathermen, sometimes, I've always said, can be their own worst enemy.
Say it again.
They can be their own worst enemy because they're too busy trying to outdo each other. You know, and I find that still going on in the States. You know, and rather than working together, you're tearing each other apart, and that's sad. You know, so that's something that should be always attended to by whoever the new title holder is. And other thing is, there are going to be new people that have never entered a contest, and I don't think that they should particularly feel bad if they don't win the first time they go out. Now, of course, if you run 6 times in a row, well, hello. But I mean, I think that the learning experience is good for those that maybe are new to the whole leather scene and lifestyle, etc. If you don't make it, I look at, well, what did you do especially some of these that said they've been around since time began. But what the hell you did before you ran for this contest? What were you a member of? What kind of, and you don't have to be a member. What have you volunteered for? What have you done? You know, and a lot of times there's nothing there. They start out with, well, if I win, I want to do. Well, why haven't you done anything before? What kept you from doing something? And I don't want to hear about, oh, you know, my lover, he had epilepsy, or my lover had a cold, or, you know, he wouldn't let me. Well, then, if that's the case, then you shouldn't be here now. Your priorities are totally different. You cannot really give us or represent us as a community if you've got all these other issues going on. And there have been some that have had the issues going on. There have been some that have had to step down. There have been issues of racist comments and things when a person has had the title. And I know for a perfect example, this man sitting right over there went through that. Dexter. Nasty. But he was so graceful. He just stepped right on over it. And that was the end of that. You know, I've seen that happen. I've heard it. And I will speak out about that whenever it comes to mind or comes up or it's brought to my attention. You know, I don't mind speaking out. I love to help people. I will tell them, hey, here's my phone number, here's my card, call me. I don't beg anybody. You know, if they want to, fine. If you don't, well then don't let the door hit your ass when you go on out. You know, that's that. You know, so you know, that's all I can say about it. The West Coast, it's getting better here on the East Coast for people entering contests, doing their best and learning and listening. You know, if there were more maybe workshops like this with an amount of people, God only knows how much it would help and to give people real insight. I went to a workshop that Rod had at in D.C. ONYX a couple of years ago at someone's home, and there were people that one of them thought maybe it was a stupid question. I said, there's no stupid question. There's people that are stupid and don't ask them. And he asked about S&M, and I think he asked about fisting and a few other things, and how do you handle that? And of course, several of them there lifted their eyebrows way up. You know, I hope you don't do that. But he asked the questions because he wanted to know, and I thought it was great. And I'm sure there are probably people, maybe even here today, that have questions that they haven't asked and feel embarrassed to ask. I'm not too embarrassed to answer them if I know the answer, you know, or will send them to where they can get the answer. Right. You know, I remember one year we all have heard of Tom of Finland, seen his drawings. I remember one year it was at his birthday party that they held in Chicago, and I asked him, I said, why is it I never see any black faces? Oh, you got all these white faces up there with these muscles and around. Don't they have no black folks over there in Finland? And well, I just never thought about it. And I said, yeah, right, okay. And he, later on, I saw him, it was about a year before he died, and he had started doing some action of people of color. I don't know if they were ever published or not, but he did tell me.
They were.
But
see, now we have Belasco.
So it's like, okay, and The Hunt is another one. Bill Snell, you know. And I said, you got a black lover, so why the hell don't you have any people of color, you know? Oh, well, I do. Well, where are they? I don't see them. So he drug out a few. I said, well, why aren't you out there with the rest of them? They don't sell as well? No, it's not that. It's just that I've been so busy. Okay. So I you know, it's like we live in a world where it's changing quickly, very quickly. The youngsters and this young generation, new generation, like right here, Theo. The most I've heard him talk in the entire year he's had the entire yesterday. You know? I didn't know the man had that much of a vocabulary. I used to see him and hello. He's standing there so quiet, you know. I was like, oh, okay. When you let all that come out today, I said, well, I guess he did learn something this year. I'm very proud of him, you know. Very good. But nowadays, you just have to deal with what's presented to you. Things that I used to think, and when you're talking about old guard and new guard, I was old as old could get, you know. Things that I see people wearing, costumes, all this kind of stuff. Back in the day, oh no, you weren't caught wearing no pig snouts and going down the street and tail stuck in your ass, curled out, all that shit. You know, you wasn't dealing with. There was such a strict code of dress that when I grew up, the Leatherman did not wear no chains and gold around his neck. To be precise, if you were wearing chaps, oh, you didn't just have any old kind of jock on. It better be a jock, and the straps better not be seen sticking out from your behind when you walking down the street. Now they wear whatever, whenever, wherever, you know, thing. But there was a very strict code. Your boots, what you even bought when you were getting into leather, the first things that you bought. And they used to ask, there was always a question, did you earn your leather? Some folks don't even know what that means, but, you know, don't have a clue. And of course, one person told me once, did you earn your leather? And no, I own my leather. Well, how did you do my American Express card? I said, well, you go ahead on. Yeah. So he bought all of his, you know. But nowadays, leather is expensive. Young people can't really afford to buy leather. Like it's always been expensive, but it used to be a lot cheaper than it is now, you know. So unfortunately, they borrow other folks' leather when they enter these contests. Well, in fact, unless you was in a flood, something's wrong with those pants, you know. They're way up there. They don't even think about, well, I borrowed so-and-so. Well, if you borrowed the leather, that means you don't have any. So how are you going to be a leather title holder and borrowing everybody else's leather? You know, that don't make sense to me. Hello? Do you own your own leather? Well, yes, I own some shoelaces. And so it's like, you know, whatever. So I just kind of say, okay, maybe I'm just too hard on some people, you know, with their boots, with their polish. But there's certain things that you can take care of yourself and look decent, even if you only have a pair of boots and a pair of Levi's, black shirt, or a vest. Buy little things that you can afford, you know, and move on up that way. Other than that, I think that's about it. Any questions?
Well, before we go in, please give me a round of applause. was given to me actually earlier when we found out that we were going to have this chat. And I've learned about you, your reputation preceded you, and I remember my first experience walking into MAL. The two people that they told me to be careful around was Vern Stewart and Marcus Hernandez.
Hello.
Because if you didn't have it right, they both would get you together quickly.
In a heartbeat.
And with that, one person asked me, what were your feelings, or where were you when the movie Cruising came out, and how did you feel about it?
I went to the movie. Matter of fact, I was in New York when it came out. Now that I think about it. And I took it for what it was, a movie, pictorial. I didn't try to read something into it. I didn't try to think, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? I went for the sheer enjoyment of seeing how they portrayed gays and all the shit that went on at that time. I knew that there were people that participated in all those kind of things. I didn't know any of them, up close. But it's like Cruising it was one of those movies that I said, oh yeah, okay, I saw that. Moved on. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I really didn't, I was more concerned back in that era of that night when I went to New York and I was in standing out on 72nd, 73rd, and anyway, out at Campbell's Funeral Home, which is up there.
I know where it is.
Campbell's Funeral Home. I stand in line to see Judy Garland, because she had just died in London, and they shipped her body back, And I, got to go see Judy, Queen's wanted to see Judy. And I stood there for 4 hours in that line, and took in every single thing she had on. Then, got back in line again to double check everything. And then after that, we left and went to down to the village. Well, little did I know that the Queens had gotten ugly and unhappy at the Stonewall, and shit was flying through the air. Chairs and rocks and all this other stuff that night. And I said, why am I always at the wrong place at the wrong time? That was my initial indoctrination to New York and their gay scene with Stonewall. And I said, oh my, isn't this something? These girls get vicious down here. These cars were being pushed over and set on fire and what have you. And finally, after about maybe an hour and a half of that, I said, it's time for me to take my black ass out of here. And I'm going home. I've seen enough of this. But I couldn't get home. Everything was blocked off and all of that shit. And I thought, oh no, this is not going to be pretty. Or if one of these rocks hits me upside my head or something or another. But that's when I saw people, gays, drag queens, everybody was sick of it. They wasn't going to take it anymore, and they hated the mayor. They were sick of him. They were sick of the police. They were just plain sick. And from that, that's one thing that happened in New York that started all that going on. Other things happened throughout the country. I mean, San Francisco had their share of all of that. They even have, there's a bar called Badlands in San Francisco. It's right on 18th Street. The owner of that bar used to own restaurant called the Patio, which was on Castro up around the corner. And he decided there was too many y'all going in his bar. And he decided to do the IDs. Oh, well, that's your driver's license? Oh. Well, do you have a birth certificate? Oh. Well, I'm sorry, we need a birth certificate, driver's license, and a passport.
Oh, shit.
And it was only with the blacks. And they were the young blacks. And the young blacks, you don't want to fuck with them. Because they get angry and all upset. And they protested, picketed, and had huge crowds out there. And that dumbass, he's an asshole, I know him personally, but he had to change that. He even had his bartenders think, oh no, he's not like that. The hell if he's not. So now he changed his attitude about that. And what did he turn around and do? He bought what is now, what used to be known as the Pendulum. He now owns that. He changed the name.
Sure did.
And redid it. But he's not telling anybody they have to have 14 pieces of ID anymore. Because they're going to run him out of town. They got the city involved. So that shit's still going on in various places. Don't think that it's all over with now. We can just sit back. Never sit back. Never take it.
How long ago did that happen?
That was year before last.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Oh yeah.
What did they change the name to? Because I forgot.
It's got the same emblem. I'm trying to think. It's got the same emblem that the Pendulum used to have.
Yeah.
It's called something. I can't think of it now. But they changed the name.
Because it's on 18th and Castro, right? Yeah.
Well, not on 18th and Castro. It's up.
Oh, that's right.
It's
Yeah.
right next. It's catty-cornered from the edge.
Right.
The
Right.
edge, yeah. I mean, that was a fun bar. But in those days,
Yeah.
people were not, back then, they really didn't care what color you were. They wanted to know what color was your money, you know, and as long as they could drop it in that Jewish juice harp and go cha-ching, cha-ching, you know, then they were fine. They were fine with it, you know. And more as guys started coming out in leather and going south of Market, they found, well, it really isn't a terrible, threatening place. It really is not. But like New York now, they've got basically the one leather bar. Yeah. But what's happening with the younger generation now? They're infiltrating the straight bars. There's men, women, gays, transvestites, transsexuals, bisexuals, homosexuals, all of that, and women, and they all kind of, that's been the thing, the new thing now, and I noticed that when I was up there last week. They're not segregating and separating like they used to. There was a time when the men went to their bar, and there best not be no women in there, you know, and that was even at the San Francisco Eagle. They put women out. Oh no, you don't belong in here. You go to your bar.
Yeah, it was like that.
So, you know.
Everybody, not everybody knows, but you have a very interesting nickname. The Wicked Witch of the East. And could you please share with all of us how you got that name? Because every time anyone hears it, everybody goes, oh hell.
It was pretty simple. When I was living in California, I used to come every year to NAL. And my first NAL was, well, the first one they had was 1986. And I came back here, and Al Santora, who was one of the old grand dames from there, used to MC the contest every year. Well, that second year I came, and I was on flight, and the plane went from San Fran to New York, but my bag went to Milan. And so they had a nice trip. And they had nothing to
They
wear.
put anything good in?
What am I going to do? So when they lent me some leather rack, lent me some leather so I could look like I knew something about leather. And I was announced on stage. They always bring out the judges. And Al Fantor thought he was being funny. He said, "Oh Lord, here comes the wicked witch from the West." And that, from that time, everybody, ha 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 ha. The next year, nobody knew my name. Oh, here comes the witch. I have a name on my birth certificate.
And which ain't it, right?
And that's how, from that point on, it's just stuck. You know? I told him one day, many years later, bitch. Yeah, that's how. And then, of course, Marcus. When I moved, I mean, he said, "Oh, I'll be the wicked witch of the West." I said, "I will not bestow that title upon you. It will not be bestowed until I said." So, for many years, he said, "Well, I thought he was going to let me be the wicked witch." I said, "I'm of the East and the West."
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for spending this
Thanks for
intimate
listening to
time.
me babble on.
No, and Vern, we thank you for sharing your life and your experiences with us. Once again, let's give Vern Stewart a round of applause. Thank you so much. And now we shall be moving into our people game.